Hey guys, we're continuing where we left off inside the last video as we're running through this free play RPG system, tabletop RPG. So as we left off, this section of the book is Game Master, and it just gives a brief description of, what a Game Master is, what he's supposed to do, building your world. But being that this part is part of the first book, the core book, it doesn't really go into too much detail on that. And just letting you know you're ready. So from at this point here, you could just start playing the game from this point. You don't have to go into, anything else if you don't want to, at least not right away. And then, hiccups. And you can figure it out from that point, get a feel of the game, whatever the case is. And then later on go into the hero expansion afterwards, which goes into a lot more detail. You jump into the hero expansion, which, you have your little introduction, welcoming you back and whatnot, getting started, and some of the basics. The basics that were already inside the original core book, well, this is still part of the core book, but this is the hero expansion aspect of the core book. It adds some new basics that in the basic section previously covered for just you having a regular game without superpowers. For superpowers, you now have a little bit added stuff that comes in the category of basics. So to update you for having superpowers, this just lets you know that this section is going to be about charts that will be linked to the power section that comes after the charts. So you would kind of relate these charts to the powers. And here it goes. Now, this whole system is going to be a little bit odd in terms of the charts, in terms of the way things work here. I'm going to explain it so you kind of really understand it, because people will be like, some of these things are weird and how the way they flow. They're all over the place. How does it break down? How does it work? And I'm going to tell you exactly. And I got to be careful with the words that I say, because I don't want any kind of copywritten stuff to come back to bite me or anything like that. But essentially, a lot of people grew up on a certain superhero company. I'm not going to say the name of it, but a certain superhero company that had made cards. They made collectible cards back in the days, and they came up with a chart system when other companies for superheroes never had a chart system, and that chart system went from 1 to 7. And for a lot of people, that just became a basis. Me myself included, when I was a young kid, that was a basis for so that system, as I was saying, was a basis for how, when I used to create characters on my own, draw characters and whatnot, I use that same system, that same basis for creating, my worlds, my own imaginary worlds. I was inspired by that 1 to 7 category system to do this. Now, essentially what I did is I took the same, the general statistical breakdown that was inspired by that. And I'm not going to say I took the same thing. I say it was inspired by that to create, for example, if you had someone who had a superhuman class strength that fell from the stat of like a 4, you generally lifted somewhere above 2 tons, but up to 10 tons. And so that's what squeezed into this category. A strength 5 went up to 50 tons, strength 6 went up to 100 tons, and then strength 7 was anything above 100 tons. So here I gave it a cap to say, well, strength 7 is going to max out from anything from 100 tons to 100,000 tons. Just to kind of, within a game, you got to have some kind of limitation. So I went with that. With that being the case, what you have here is a division of equal breakdown of from 100 tons up to 100,000 tons, broken down within the category of the strength 7. And that's why these numbers start to reflect in a weird way versus each category. Each category is divided amongst how many slots are in that category with the weight that will be within that category. And then because a 7 can be anything above 100 tons, we then separated a 7 from an 8. So you knew what's a kind of low 7 versus a high 7, because a high 7 go anywhere. So we made that high 7 into an 8, where you start having cosmic entities and stuff like that. That little brief description, I know it went overboard with that, but I just wanted to kind of let you guys know that. So with that being said, we have energy, which kind of also is kind of weird. So I'm going to quickly explain that as well. It starts at a class 3. Why does it start with a class 3? Because in that system of stats that this was inspired by, a class 1 equated to nothing. It just meant that every stat went from 1 to 7, and 1 didn't mean anything. 2 kind of meant very insignificant, or levels that was very minute. May even be just by touch. And there's a power in here called like fire skin, where it's, and I'm going to get to that later, but just to kind of reference it here, is a D4 damage of just fire on your skin. So if you touch somebody, it's a D4 damage, which is very minimum, a form of energy, but that would be the equivalent of, say, a class 2. So class 3, the reason why we, instead of giving that just 1, it's supposed to match the equivalent level of damage to the class 3 of strength. And so on with mental. Class 3 starts here because it's now the equivalent equal damage level, or like in that range of the class 3 of energy, or the class 3 of strength. And this goes back to what I was saying before about damage being a little bit more varied. A class 3 of energy is more variable, but can be, up to a 12 in damage. A class 3 in strength is more consistent, but if you're using your fist, you will get more damage out of it. But obviously, you're more close combat versus that having range. And then mental is less damage, but at the same time, it is something that's a little harder to defend. So, and as we get into explaining it more, you'll kind of see how that works in terms of the ways that people defend themselves. Fighting goes also from a class 1 to class 7. And this includes for your fighting, agility, and accuracy, all go off the same basis, which you're rolling the D100 for. But each range of it, so say when you roll your stat and you have a 1 to 3, you're in a class 1 range. 4 to 6, class 2, 3, so on and so forth. And the reason why that's important is because if you, like me, made your own kind of world when you were a young kid and inspired it off of these stats, which were the only kind of stats that existed for a long period of time, from like maybe the early 90s all the way up until today. And a lot of, like comic stuff don't even have any kind of system or anything like that. Then essentially, what happens is you may have made your own universe and you want to translate your characters straight over into a game world. Well, you can do that because they're going to fall right into these categories if you ever built your world based on those stats. And I think a lot of people did back in the days because there were no such thing as comic stats other than this one company making their own comic stats at the time. Here you have your health chart going also from what would essentially be a 1 to 7, but the 8 represents, since 7 can be anything above and beyond, we kind of give an 8 to differentiate a low 7 to a high 7 in that regard. Speed, we go all the way up to the speed of light, which the actual speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. But here we just round it off to 200,000 miles per second to say, hey, you can go from, if you have the power of running, we max it out at pretty much the speed of light. Teleporting as well. You can have leap powered, but obviously you're not going to leap beyond a certain amount of distance. So here we have 1,000 miles as leap. Then the rest of this chart just is teleport only, which can go up to limitless, because once you go from 1 million miles, which is more than like the earth is really like, I don't know, some one point, we'll put it like this, from one end of the US to the other end of the US is somewhere around 3,000 miles. So generally you get an idea that you're easily crossing the world without a problem. That's really for when you're going to have characters who are teleporting from one planet to another. We're not even going to go into light years, this and that. We're just going to say limitless if you're going to get to that point. So it is what it is. And then here goes the actual power set of things. You have strength, which you can, purchase points, because this is a point-based system where you will purchase these. And so each power is going to have a point system, and the game master will decide how many points everyone's going to have and what's going to be the limit to, any kind of level caps based on a class level. You might say no one goes past a class 5 in any capability, which is why that whole class system of power levels is, works very well. And with that being said, each thing's going to have a power point. The game master will determine how many points everyone's going to have. You have strength. You can increase energy, which has a whole set of breakdown on things you can do with that in terms of having energy blast, purchasing an energy shield, purchasing different types of energy. It has a whole subcategory breakdowns on that. Mental, which also has its own subcategory, just like energy does. And you can purchase different points to refine it to the way you want. We try to keep everything very simple here, so it's kind of very, easy to kind of pick up, easy to learn, and it's not too complicated. Now, you don't have every power that ever existed, but you have a lot of powers, and this is all just a basis for you if you want to inspire you to make your own powers to go along with it. Fighting, agility, accuracy, this is just a way for you to build that up if you want, just paying a certain amount of points to build that up. Health, you could build up your health. Energy, healing, there's healing and there's energy / magic healing. So healing is just your natural healing at the beginning of your turn. You're going to roll and you're going to heal. If you don't pay for this, you don't have any kind of specific healing every round. It's just when the game master might tell you, okay, this many days pass, you heal like a regular man. Otherwise, if you want to heal every turn, you got to pay for some kind of healing. Energy magic healing is not a passive type of healing. It's more of an active healing. So you have to use one of your actions to heal either yourself or someone else. And it explains it in there. Flight and run speed, you're going to refer to the chart when you make your purchase. Teleportation, leap, the same thing. Invisibility, you're going to pay for the ranks in that. This is actually, like I was saying before, this point that you're looking at here is out of date because the price on this, it costs more because it has more additional abilities written out with it. Invisibility is actually a very powerful tool into this game because it affects many other things, including things like your ability to be critically hit and how you actually attack other people and whatnot. So it goes into details on that and what makes invisibility so powerful, and sometimes not when someone can detect it. Growth and shrink. You have health drain, which is essentially just draining someone's health directly in some kind of form or fashion, and healing yourself with it. So that's how that works. It's you're draining their abilities and draining their health and directly healing yourself after the fact. Poison and tranquilizer, which is a thing as well. And we also have poison and trank resistance. We have regular resistance to either energy, physical, or mental damage, because that's your primary forms of damage in this game: energy, physical, and mental. And you have resistance. Now, resistance in this game only goes up to 5 points of resistance. The reason why is because there are some games systems that have so much in the realm of resistance that it starts to get a little unfair, and it complicates things when someone has damage reduction of like 20-30 points and no one can even hit them. Here, the idea of it, if you have some kind of powerful, strong kind of brick type archetype, and you want him to have really good damage reduction, maybe he has a damage reduction of a 4 or a 5 towards energy and physical attacks, which is indicating like, very hard skin. You're going to also, in addition to that, make sure he has a high durability. So he's shrugging off damage, not just in the sense that he's not feeling it, but he's got a high threshold, so high in his health that, in theory, if a person who has like, say, 500 health, in the comic book world gets hit for, we'll say, 20 points of damage, and he reduces, we'll say, like 4 points of damage. He doesn't have the highest level of damage reduction. He reduces 4 points of that 20 damage, and now it's down to 16. 16 points of damage out of 500 health is so insignificant to him. It's like he didn't take a hit. Damage wise, he did, but to what he didn't even take, not even the equivalent of 10% damage. So in all consideration, if you as a person took 10% damage, like a cat scratch you, yeah, you might be like, ow, that hurts. But are you really like hurt? No, you're not. And that's how you reflect them shrugging off damage, is a combination of having a lot of health plus having, some form of damage reduction. Stretch And there's a change on this that says correspond accordingly. Every time you just add points of rank, you just keep going with that whole, the next rank of a 6 goes to 60 feet, 7 goes to 70 feet, so on, and just keep going up by tens. So the change in the finished version has that. Resurrection is an ability. Wish or reality manipulation. They both count as the same thing here, but it's just the basis how you want to use it or phrase it. If you're somebody who's dealing with magic, you might say, oh, they're making a wish is how they do it, or it's the equivalent of a wish capability, even though you're not making a wish, but it's through the form of magic. It's like you're just speaking the words and it's happening. Or if your person's a cosmic person who deals kind of similar to characters who have those kind of abilities, maybe you have matter manipulation, or you're warping reality. It all falls into the same category. You just might name it differently, but essentially it's giving you the power. Refer to your GM, but it's giving you the power to change things inside the world, or almost utilize any given immediate power that's inside this book. That's one of those things that costs a lot of points. It's like 10 points for you to pay for, so it gets higher in cost. Precognition, that's a power that works really fun. I'm not going to go into explaining this right now, but it's a really fun power. You can read here if you want to pause the video and read it. But it's really cool. It pretty much just allows you to kind of act out something, and then if you didn't like the way that worked, you can react it out, and that counted that you knew what was going to happen before it happened. And it goes further examples on how to use that power, so you understand how to use it, and refer to your GM on how they want to allow you to use it. But these examples kind of give you an idea of how that works. Time manipulation essentially is allowing you to make re-rolls or change up actions. That power has also been kind of a little altered in the finished version, but probability control, very similar to time manipulation. Probability control or luck, you could play it either way. You have characters in the superhero world who have the ability of luck and things always go their way, or probability control is almost like if you have a genius and they're so smart, they kind of assessed all the different situations that could occur, and they play things in their favor by kind of knowing the outcome, which almost equates to the same thing as luck. So same power, same basis, but however you want to say your character, does it differently. And in this case, it works very similar to time manipulation. Difference: time manipulation allows you to re-roll your roll after you rolled, or even re-roll someone else's roll. Probability control only lets you re-roll your rolls, but you're not re-rolling after the fact. You're re-rolling twice and just taking the better version. You don't get to determine how the results occurred after the fact. You have to announce it in advance, so it's not as good as time manipulation, but it costs less. So then here goes what's called basic powers. These are, for the most part, some of them may not have ranks, some of them may, but these are more like your low-key powers that are just kind of little add-ons to your core abilities, even though you can make a character who just has these abilities, but nonetheless, these are the more simple stuff. Fire skin, claws and spikes. If you want to give your guy that, they're going to have built-in weapons of doing a D6 damage rather than a D4. Additional limbs. Maybe you want to have more reach. Coils, extra things of that sort. You want to give them wings, but if you give them wings, you can only glide. You have to pay for the flight ability. X-ray vision. And if you want, you can open that up into other forms of vision as you see fit. But, here we just kind of depicted, obviously, being able to see through walls. Enhanced senses, super senses. You just really have those two, and that gives all your senses. If you want to be creative and say, I only want maybe half my senses to work because, I want to be blind, that's on you, but it's more of a flavor thing. Here you're paying for all your senses to be either enhanced or super, and it just breaks it down in a simple format, not trying to be over the top. Enhanced senses pretty much give you the best senses that animals would have. We can kind of comprehend that. Super senses gives you the ability to see for miles, hear for miles, taste, detail, microscopic, all these kind of things. So you can kind of play with that in your mind and refer to the GM if you need to. Webs, whether it breaks down that they're organic or they're artificial or synthetic, or however you want to phrase it, non-organic. The freeze ability, this is the ability that in general you could or would attach to your energy blast if you want, but we put it in this category because in this section of basic powers because maybe you want to have this ability just to touch somebody and just freeze them, and you don't have an energy blast. So defensive fighting essentially allows you to use your fighting ability as defense. But we actually worked this out where we didn't want it to just be you can do that to anybody, because there are other systems where people have done that, but it wouldn't make sense for some caped crusader who's a regular man to be able to defensively fight and block attacks from a guy who punches mountains and puts holes in mountains. So the way it's depicted is you can only defend with defensive fighting using your fighting to defend against someone who is a strength category of 1 above yours. Is your limit. So someone who's equal to you or obviously below you, but someone who's higher than you only by 1 strength category. If someone's more than 1 strength category above you, you cannot block their physical attack. They're gonna break your arm. So that's why that's depicted in that way. And I think it tries to make sense of it all. Radar, 6th sense, obviously, and it has special abilities that go along with that too. Sorry that the book wasn't in frame. Super fast perception, and it kind of works similar to radar sense in some of the ways that it has bonuses, but also works differently in the way that it's depicted in the role-playing sense and in things that you were able to do with it in terms of what you're able to perceive and things of that sort. Energy damage absorption, a very simple breakdown of this is if you have damage reduction, you have to have damage reduction first. Every bit of damage reduction that you do, you now are able to take that into a pool of energy. So if you have damage reduction of a 3, and your damage reduction is for physical attacks, you are able to take, anytime you get hit with a physical attack, that 3 damage reduction now gets put into a pool of up to 20, into a bank. You can now use that extra energy as it builds up to either disperse this extra damage or whatever the case is. If you buy both energy damage and physical damage, your pool or your bank doesn't get bigger. It's still 20, but now you're able to absorb from both forms of attack, not just one when it comes in. So, and you go into the details of it here, of how that works and all the, all the details in it and whatnot. How you're able to utilize that energy, because you can utilize it in multiple ways, not in just one way. Feature is simply a kind of catch-all for other kind of things you want to throw in for powers, or it's essentially like saying, hey, make up your own powers. But things like wall crawling will go into here. Underwater breathing will go into as a feature. Self-sustaining, meaning that you don't require no oxygen or food. Immortal. Photographic memory is just a couple examples, but you can even go into things like, you want your person to be wealthy, throw it in there into a cost of feature. The GM will refer to what he feels is okay for a point level for it, but it's put here as 1 point. Generally for most things that are like wall crawling, this and that, just 1 point. All those basic things I mentioned, 1 point. If it's something where it's like, something astronomical, maybe he'll charge you more points for it, but refer to your GM. But that's usually just the basis for just other fill-in powers that you want to throw in. Multi-targeting can be attached to almost anything, whether it's your magic healing, where you want to heal multiple people. It's going to cost +2 per rank. Your shooting, this makes your energy projection, your energy attacks or mental attacks can end up costing a lot. You can make it +2 per rank. So once you start paying into the ranks, this can start getting expensive. But a workaround that too, and I give an example here written down here, is that if you have up to a class 4 in energy, you can pay just to make a class 3 shot multi-attacking, but your class 4 is not. That way you saved points because you didn't pay for it on your higher level, but on your lower level, only up to your lower level. So, and that breaks into details here. Illusion, power, which breaks down into mental or energy. So it gets connected with you having energy or mental stat. If you have the mental stat and you pay for illusion, your illusions is in a person's mind. If you have an energy stat, because you bought the energy power and you attach it to energy, your illusions are physical, like holograms. So there's a different dynamic between both of those two, and they're actually defended against differently in terms of how you detect them. True sight is a detection ability, and this applies for things like invisibility, illusions, shape-shifting. and any other thing that the GM wants to allow you to have with that ability. But essentially, you pay for it and it allows you to kind of see through anything that would be an illusion over your face or your eyes or whatever the case is. Super senses and enhanced senses also detect certain things too, and you can refer to that into the rules of these powers. It will show you that and tell you what detects what and what beats what. And this last little note is just feel free to add new powers if you want, because that's what this whole system's about, is you making it your own. Miscellaneous stuff tells you about things like the difference between transformation versus being in a suit, and certain limitations with that, and a few other little details of miscellaneous things you might want to know. How to tack on extra strength items with your strength and how to calculate that. This is an example of like a John Doe of what powers and how that breaks down. Power level glossary, I was telling you before, this kind of gives you an idea of what these classes mean. So for example, in strength, you're just going to refer to the chart and it just tells you that here. For energy, it says for class 3, enhanced human represents energy level discharge equal to a small firearm. So it kind of gives you a basis of what to compare it to in your mind, so you kind of have an idea. But keep in mind, energy is still energy. It's not a physical attack, so it's not saying it is a firearm, but it's saying the damage that you're distributing is around the equivalent of a firearm's level of damage, if that makes any sense to you. So it's a way for your mind to kind of wrap around what that would be the equivalent to. So if you're some person who's blasting energy bolts out of your hand at a class level 3, it's the equivalent of what you'd be doing with, roughly the equivalent of what you'd be doing with like a regular basic handgun. And you know, the same over here, you have you know, mental, health, breakdown, agility, fighting, accuracy. So it gives you an idea of where, you know, what these things really mean in terms of you comprehending them and understanding them, and whatnot. In terms of healing too, what that means, how fast someone's recovering. So rank 1 healing is above normal, able to recover from basic wounds in several hours to up to a day. So you kind of giving a sense, and it breaks down here in the basics of healing that when you have regular human healing is no form of healing at all. You're not going to be healing by way of every turn at regular human healing. Resistance, and it breaks down what that means. That's either a form of hard skin or maybe energy absorbing skin if you only have resistance to energy, or mental, you have like mental fortitude, and it breaks all that down. And then this last page here in regards to all that is just letting you know that what the stats are for a normal man. So it's essentially like a regular average man is in a class range of his strength is 2. So everything that fits into a class range of 2 in strength, that's what it fits based on your height and weight. Because depending on your height and weight, if you're like a little kid, but you're lifting 500 pounds, that's superhuman, even though, you know, that still falls in a class 2 range of like a regular human strength. Agility, the limit of a regular man is a 4. Anything above that starts to go into like a more enhanced human range. Your health is class 2. Anything above that starts to go into like a superhuman range as well. Fighting accuracy have no limits because you can be trained to that level. Your energy and mental obviously are stats that only come with you having superhuman abilities, which is what you have to pay for to have them at that level. And generally speaking, these are the limits of a regular human. And, you know, you can kind of play with that a little bit, but it just gives you a reference. And with that, I'm going to stop, pause here, and we're going to continue inside the next video to break this up again, because this video got long. So we're going to have a part 3 of this video. So just stay tuned to watch that in that next video.